Right, Jane,
Uh,
thanks for spending some time with me again today. Um, how would you describe yourself as a facilitator?
as a facilitator, quite physically expressive, kind of body language, musically switched in, that I really like to hear, to kind of compose while facilitating. So things have a start and a middle and an end to some kind of facilitation intervention. Um, and quite small. And I think probably in my kind of work, I've tended to gravitate towards the kind of health and well-being end of working. And for me, facilitation is a way to really try and bring every person within that circle to say, you matter, your contribution is worth it, you're worth it, you have a place here in this circle.
What drew you to the health and well-being side of facilitation as opposed to other areas like corporate or, the other areas that exist?
I think for me it was a journey that got deeper and deeper the more I went through it. So my first job, in a sense, was as a performer, and my motivation there was like I just really want to make people happy by standing in front of them. Yeah, and actually, it's got slightly more nuanced the further I've moved along. So instead of like performing at people, for me it became a much richer experience to do things with people and alongside people. Um, and then within that, rather than just teach people stuff, it became, the thing that's really attracted me to drum circle facilitation is this empowerment aspect of it. The fact that it's working with people and the resources that they have within themselves. And then I suppose in the health and well-being side of things, it's that thing of it, not just being a pleasurable activity or a fun Sunday afternoon, which is brilliant, and is still life changing for many people. But I think it just drops and drops and drops to a slightly deeper kind of level of engagement. To the point where people genuinely say this has changed my life, um, from having and engaging in this experience.
I love that shift from performing at people to performing with people and performing
I've loved
alongside people.
anything.
How did you come to be where you're at in your facilitation? What was your journey to where you are now?
My journey. I first discovered it way back in just when Arthur Hall's book first came out. I'd been to a very well led samba drumming workshop. I was living in the Western Isles of Scotland. It was on a different island. And that so much captured my imagination that as soon as I got back on very creaky island internet, I typed in like how to run drumming workshops. I thought this is what I want to be when I grow up. I was already 25. um, and up popped this book, Drum Circle Spirit. Wow, those three words just kind of landed there, and the ripples went out. And then the subtitle, Facilitating Human Potential Through Rhythm. There was my life mapped out. And in a sense, it's been a journey into getting deeper with that ever since. So I ended up doing a degree in community arts, and pretty much alongside that then began to study with Arthur Hall and attend play shops. And those two educational processes went side by side. And then following that, just kind of carried on studying and carried on facilitating, which led to me doing a PhD and actually choosing drum circle facilitation as my topic, because in a sense it wasn't, from the reading I was doing, it wasn't being given attention in the academic literature. There was stuff on like music education, teaching
Hmm.
on performance and on music therapy. And for me, I saw drum circles as something that wasn't squarely in any of those camps, but could relate to all of those camps. Um, so my PhD was basically just asking the question, what's going on? What are we doing with this thing? Um, And so I think that journey has led me to understand what we're about in a very different way, and to really see its application into all kinds of different settings. Um, and then I think I first did a workshop in a hospital, by request of a friend who was a music therapist, who at the time, was working very one to one, and that was her professional discipline. This is 20 years ago. And that was much more the narrative. Now, music therapy has obviously changed to become much more of a community thing. Um, but back then, she felt like she had to work on her professional boundaries. So she said, "Look, I can't do group workshops, but I have a friend that can." Um, and then asked me whether I would consider going into a hospital, and running a workshop, and said yes, because I was very curious. And then, just right from that first workshop, I could see these huge changes happening in people. Um, there was a man there who was brought in, and I'm sure lots of us have these stories of, who's very withdrawn, very into himself. Um, and the rhythm starts, and I could see just a little finger moving, and then a hand, um, and then a couple of hands just moving, and then I thought, well, I'll see what I'll offer him some drumsticks because it seems like this is working. He grabbed the drumsticks, um, and suddenly, incredible drum solo comes out, and we start having this dialogue, this kind of call and response, and trading solos off each other. It's a very articulate, very musical guy who just wasn't there, or appeared
Yeah.
like he wasn't there before. Um, and then the workshop finished, and he's like, "Oh, thank you," at the end of it. And some of the nursing staff said he hasn't talked for about 6 years. um,
Wow.
so of course that's me hooked in this kind of work. Of course it is. And I became so curious and so determined that actually there is always somebody there. There's always some place you can connect with people, and engage and reach. And I think music and rhythm, is a great short circuit to that and to doing that thing,
Mm.
of just finding ways to be together as human beings. Um, so that's my origin story. And that's how, um, yeah, and it's just been a series of progressions from there in terms of building on the study and the work within kind of hospitals and care, increasing and increasing, as well as just more general drum circle facilitation.
You mentioned Arthur Hull earlier. Who were and are your influences in the work that you do?
Alcohol.
Oh, you've already mentioned him.
I have, so I the Music for People community are wonderful. So that would be David Darling and Mary Knish and that whole gang over there. And particularly for me in, expanding this sense of what's possible, in making in the moment music with the group, and bringing in melody and harmony. They've been particularly influential. And then up here in Scotland, there's a guy called John Bell and the Wild Goose Resource Group that, have done lots and lots of work about singing, group singing, congregational song, um, and bringing that side into things. So actually, I brought in these three, um, practices into my thesis when I was studying because I could see this similarity there. And there's a lot in terms of methodology and how you do it, in terms of that, um, openness to bringing music to any kind of person, whether they feel musical or not. All these forms of musical are accessible. If it's melody, harmony, rhythm, all of these things.
And bringing those sort of three bits into your practice, what did that give you?
A whole load of fun and joy and musicality. Um, it it's given me a lot of places to go with the group. Um, so I'm not kind of stuck in one place or with a particular set of things that you might do, over an hour. Um, so kind of intuiting whether actually it's the space for something a little bit more melodic, or how could we stretch within a particular group and grow. um, I think, yeah, and actually also a greater sort of potential to connect with musicians from very, very different genres as well. So I'm now doing some work with quite a few classical musicians, and that's an absolute joy. And
Mm.
I'm from a really different side of the tracks musically, but having had this experience, looking very deeply at improvisation and how multiple instruments can fit together and voice and all of these things and how music can be structured together, it's such a gift, and it's an absolute delight to be working so differently.
Do you find do you find as a facilitator having that hunger is really really important to that sort of need to not yeah probably need to grow, stretch yourself, look for new tools, look for new ideas, look for new instruments that keeps the kind of the experience fresh for yourself as well as anybody else?
I think so. I think I know myself enough to know that the possibility for getting stale or for just relying on the stuff that I know works, um and I can sense those moments when it bubbles up and it's time to stretch to look at something new. So I think I will always be like an eternal student, um and looking out for new ways to engage.
But it's that sense of also kind of pushing yourself to the edge of vulnerability. I spoke to quite sort of briefly with Paul about this area of growth that we have as facilitators. We take people sometimes in the group to the edge, to their vulnerabilities and their insecurities when they come faced with a drum or a musical instrument, but also the need and desire to do the same for ourselves in order for us to grow as well.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point, Ray. Well done.
Thank you.
It's actually it is one of my favorite topics, and it's kind of the zen of facilitation, and very hard to do starting out. Um, I always think I really needed the plan, but it's having the plan and then being able to abandon that plan. And I think for me, when I'm working with people in more and more increasingly vulnerable situations, um, it's almost like the worst thing I could do would be to go in and be perfect and highly accomplished, and because then who do I think I'm kidding? I think some of the power of it comes as being present as a human being in your own vulnerability, that can then connect with other people.
Mm.
And I think particularly, I think when I'm working with older people with dementia, and there's a project I'm involved in where there's a team of four of us, and actually we do a lot of thinking and reflecting as a group. And the thing that keeps coming up is that ability to go to that don't know space, um, which is the scariest place because we just
Mm.
don't know. We don't know.
Mm.
Um, and actually, from that place, that's the place where new ideas and new creativity gets born, and it becomes much more mutual. Um, and really, if we believe in that sense of empowerment and community, then we meet on that level rather than that level or that level. Um, and I think it's that vulnerability and that shared sense of, and it's not a not knowing in the sense of I've got no ideas, or but it's in the sense of like I don't have to be directing this entirely. Um, Something might happen here that will then light something into a flame musically, um, and will take things in a whole new different direction that I hadn't anticipated. And if
Mm.
I'm always the one giving the input, then there's that aspect of control there. It's a very nuanced place because equally, there's times when actually we're still in the don't know space, and that fear comes up, um, or just taking the time for things to evolve as well. I think it's a difficult place, but it's such a creative place.
That don't know space. I love that. Really, really quite, yeah, that's really quite moving that. How do you feel, who do you feel you were when you started? And how do you feel you've changed across this journey?
Uh-huh. When I started, I was definitely much more of a performer. I remember reading Drum Circle Spirit, and I got to the line where, like, it's not about you. I'm like, why would I want to do
What?
that? So, one would hope that has changed over the 20 odd years I've been doing this. Um, And so I think, yeah, I've learned to be so much more humble. um, no, I think it's been a huge journey of growth for me. I think it's taken me to so many different places of human joy and human pain, um, and um, just very honest, open contact with people, facing my own fears, facing my own arrogance, all of these things. I think you do meet yourself coming the other way in a sense,
Yeah.
in this kind of practice. And I've definitely gone on a pendulum from beginning with like it's all about me. This is how I get to look great in front of a group of drummers. Um, to it's completely not about me. And I think I went too far that way as well. To the point where groups were saying like, "Well, you're the leader. Come, give us something."
Mm,
I'm like, "Oh, I can't interfere. It's not about me." um, and so having to learn to kind of put myself back into the process a bit, and always dancing that dance between when's time to offer something, when's time to step back and let that just take off by itself. um yeah, it is, it's basically it's a personal growth journey,
yeah.
and it continues to unfold and to grow as well. But I think for me it's about ways to experience the world and ways to experience people.
What do you feel are your particular strengths as a facilitator? And how do you think your style has evolved over the years you've been doing this?
Ooh, I think probably listening. I think, and being very attuned to a group, and very much actually, hopefully, yeah, it's always very hard talking about your best characteristics. Where to start? um, but I think that very strong radar for a group and what's bubbling up in a group and how that could, somebody's thing that they're doing could be brought out and showcased and take things in another direction. Um, I think musicality, I think, and bringing that sense of kind of telling a story through a segment of facilitation in some way, um, of simplicity and actually not feeling like you have to throw everything in the pot at once. So that really very simple interventions can be really, really beautiful and concise, and to take people to that next little level of a platform. Um, and I think the further on I've got, the more and more I've been attracted to simplicity, like real simplicity in facilitation. Um, and yeah, yeah.
What do you think you could develop more?
Oh, so much. Um, gosh. Um, oh, how long have you got? I think um, probably. Oh, that's such a hard question. Um, I think sometimes my energy might swing quite a bit. So I think potentially the groups that I find hardest to work with might be the kind of transient population, or um, things where actually you're not going on that journey with people so much as just keeping something going. Um, so I think that's where my weak spot is. Um, in terms of growing, I would always love to grow more musically. And I think music is infinite and that will never stop. um, so that's a permanent trajectory there in terms of things to learn and to grow as well.
We spoke before, we had a quick chat before we started about just you and the previous sort of conversations I've had so far. And I'm really interested about how we go about creating space and creating safe space for people and safe spaces for audiences and safe spaces for the various groups you work with. What do you feel are important about, or your important skills in creating a safe space?
I think really remembering what it feels like to be joining some kind of group for the first time, um, and how much there's that sense of I'm even now I find it really hard to go out and join a new group all by myself. Um, it's yeah, there's that tremendous sense of like, are there unwritten rules? Do I get to touch a drum or not? Whose drums where? If there's instruments on the seats, does that mean they're already taken? Or so it's that real sense of actually continually we need to as facilitators go back to square one, and put ourselves in that place and in those shoes. Um, so that's probably number one. And then I think is always finding that center of gravity where at least at some point everybody can participate and have a success. Um, Even if not everybody's able to come with you. But where can we kind of find that equilibrium or that kind of sense that, wow, at this point everybody's nailed it. Everybody's done something, even if it's just a rumble and a stop. Um, and I think to find whatever that point is with the group, and then build from there, and try and build success by success, um, would be probably kind of key to it for me.
How do you feel? I kind of, yeah, and I love that. But there's a sense of, how do you make people feel safe? How do you make them feel able to express themselves in a safe, enable them to become vulnerable, enable them to be themselves within that kind of circuit that you've set up?
Yeah, I think being able to be vulnerable myself as well and to go there. Um, I think in many groups, for me to for me to be all right with people who might not want to play a drum at the moment, and who might just for them it might be as much as they can do to sit in that room,
Yeah.
and be in a group with other people and just be seeing what's going on. That might be hugely overwhelming. And if they're there, that is a success. It's a success just to walk through the door, um, and take a seat. And I think to acknowledge those as successes as well, um, and something that people can still contribute by their presence, as long as it's not an antagonistic presence. That's like a different thing. But um, I think for it to be safe, just to be there at your level of freaking out, is fine. Um, and oh, I've lost my train of thought now. Um, and I think offering kind of multiple ways to engage in something, um, so that I think I do a lot of activities and exercises, and there's usually some form of get out that isn't totally a get out as well.
Mm.
So if it's a turn taking thing and we're passing little solos around the circle, actually you could do it with one hit, or at one level further back you could even just choose the next person to have a go. So there's still something. It's not that people are let completely off the hook. There's still something a bit asked of you, um, but actually it's totally possible, um, and we're able to do that and to be there in that way.
And how do you read the energy of a group?
Continually. I think, um, and yeah, I think there's so many signs and signals in terms of, um, actual engagement and playing, or beginning to talk to a neighbor, or sitting forward, sitting back. Where's our visual attention? Are we within ourselves, which might be a good thing at some point, or are we kind of outwards and engaging? Um, all of those things. But I think to me that's also, you asked about growing edges earlier on. I think that's another infinite growing edge, um, and something I'm never going to get 100% right. but I can try and make better and better guesses.
Yeah, I sometimes feel that there's a sense, I don't know whether it comes from experience or whatever, but there's a sense that there's an energy in the group, and you kind of feel that energy.
Yeah.
And I go back to originally when with the first kind of Arthur whole thing and your radar and stuff like that. It's a kind of coming together of all these things. It's all these different senses, the sense of energy of people you read as they are in the group that contribute to how you move the session, or the session doesn't move, or you choose not to move that session kind of forward.
Yeah, I think it's a continual dance, that energetic thing, and particularly for me in a lot of hospital settings, it's something that is there in quite limited supply for a lot of people. Um, so quite often it'll go in waves. Um, that we'll reach this kind of peak of attention and concentration and engagement, and actually we're not able to sustain that for whatever, if there's something physical going on or mental going on, that actually then it needs to drop back into something a little bit less demanding and engaging for a bit, to have that kind of rest and regrouping, but then here comes the next wave and we can do that. And um, and to me it does go like that in these settings a lot.
Mm.
And that's a continual reading.
But it's, as you say, continual reading and having an awareness of where people are at and how things are developing. Both, it's almost like you're looking at the global and the individual, the
Yeah.
global and the
Yes.
individual,
Yeah.
and assessing all the individuals and the global as well, and on an ongoing process.
And sometimes for me, quite often, I've been a big journey for me is actually been letting some things carry on for longer. Um, I think when I started, I'm now answering your earlier question because it's come to mind. Um, I would throw everything in, boom, 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 and I would be the one with the short attention span that was continually like offering the next idea and the next idea, and actually, um, to take more time over things, because this is, quite often this group, it's the first time they're doing it, and so I've done it 100 times, so I can do that, but actually, um, to really enjoy doing something and not be afraid to repeat it, and maybe repeat it again, and then maybe repeat it with an added layer. Um, that just being able to take more time over things can be beautiful. Um, so I think in terms of radar, there's also that thing of like, oh, actually, could this be extended somehow? What could be the next little layer rather than switching to something completely different? How could we just build it? Or, yeah, is this cooked? Do we need to, add in something completely different now?
Do you find yourself checking in with yourself during the session as well as taking in all this other information that's going? Do you find yourself checking in with yourself, pacing, take it easy? I don't have to rush out there. I don't have to save this. It can develop. It can bubble. It can simmer.
Continually,
Yeah.
I think. And also, yeah, in terms of facilitation, but also in terms of, you know, trying not to take something personally, if there's some chatting going on in the corner, or, so if I'm starting to feel a bit threatened or nervous, or, it's checking in with those emotions too, because that will be present, and trying to again kind of relax myself and say, really, it's not, you know, about you, um, and in that sense, and to be able to kind of clear some of that clutter that might arise if things aren't going exactly as you'd hoped or anticipated, and
Yeah.
come back to that present moment. I think it is. It's a very, to me, it does feel like a discipline and a practice to continually return to that present moment and what's actually here now, what's actually happening. Can I strip away the interpretations that I'm starting to place on it and heap on it, and actually, see what's here in front of us and create that response?
What makes you unique in the field that we work in?
My hair. I don't know. um, um, me, I mean, Maybe that study aspect, that, um, but I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we're all unique. Um,
And you kind of we are all unique, and I just wondered whether you could just kind of maybe just pull a few of those threads that kind of make you unique in the field that we work in.
um, um, maybe, I mean, certainly. Well, no, I think it. Yeah, been around a while. Um, done the study thing. Working in quite a lot of different disciplines as well, and maybe bringing the facilitation skills into other settings, um, which don't obviously look like a drum circle. Um, but I think everybody's doing bits of these things as well. um, Maybe it's just that combination of some of these. Mm.
That's it. It is that combination of all these skills and how you put them together, how you take your learning and your study and your experience and your instrumentation and your musicianship, and you apply it into these areas that makes us unique. And what do you kind of see your role in a session? I know we all call ourselves facilitators, and it's to make things easy, but within a session, how do you see your role? Does it change? Does it develop?
Yes, primarily kind of space curator. Um, Space curator. I need the virtual backgrounds now. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. Because just while we talk about space curation,
Let's do it.
space
Yeah.
curator. And really right from the beginning, when you enter the room and start to move the chairs or to see where people will enter from and what they will see when they enter, or how you welcome people into it. Then it's all these dimensions of space. There's physical space, there's emotional space. What's the quality of that? What's the quality of the welcome people receive? um, there's interpersonal space. What's the dynamic between the group? How can we nurture that and kind of tweak that and encourage people to forge these kind of community bonds? um, it's being able to stand back and take a meta view of, um, um, of where things are going, and to in a big sense hold that space, um, as well as just offer the little nudges and the tweaks that into the vortex. um, that is that journey that we'll go on as a group. And so I think it's looking after that kind of space from start to finish.
And do you find yourself concentrating on certain elements of what's going on in front of you? You know, the experience of the group, the music, the experience of individuals, their participation, the inclusiveness of what you're trying to do or what they're trying to do, that sense of trying to empower them to take control.
Yes.
Thank you. I thought that might be the answer, funny enough.
Great.
I think what I love about the work we do is the fact that on the surface it looks so thin, may be the right idea, I don't know. And I think people don't really appreciate the depth to everything that we do as facilitators, or some of us do as facilitators, or most of us do as facilitators. And I think the ones that are really good at it, people like yourself and Paul, are the fact that you can stand there and think, oh, looks really, really easy. But actually, no one has any real concept of the depth that sits behind it.
Yeah.
And when I first stepped into this kind of system in 2008, I can remember my first experience of seeing a drum circle, and I thought, well, that looks fairly easy. And,
Fun stuff.
exactly.
Mm.
And here I am, uh, 13, 14 years later and still learning and still studying and still taking it on and still trying to find out more and more.
Mm.
It's just not rocking up, as Debbie said, with a load of drums in a van and, let's
Yeah.
see what happens.
Hey, let's play. Yeah. And I think I sort of touched on that a bit earlier. To me, it is like a practice. Like a martial art might be a practice, or meditation might be a practice. To me, this art of facilitation is a practice. It's something that I would continually never take for granted or think that I've ever arrived. Um, that it's always this thing about the present moment, and where are we now and where are we now, and continually having somewhere else to develop or somewhere else to go with it. Um, and that the moment I take a step, the road just gets a little bit longer. I take a step, oh, it's kind of like, um, and I think that will just continue to unfold. So I think it's as deep as you want it to get, really.
So do you feel under any pressure when you're kind of at these events to kind of make music happen, or I'm being paid to be here, I've got to, people have got to get something out of this, I'm being paid money to be here, I have to entertain?
Um, Not anymore. I think, well, maybe that's a lie. Maybe there's always that, that background might always be there. Um, I think I've grown enough confidence and kind of legitimacy in what I do now to be able to redefine that and to help anyone who might be feeling that pressure understand it in a very different way. Um, that the goals are different, and to help redirect them towards what is actually happening in the group. um, and actually it's not just, I mean, if we're explicitly talking about performance, maybe something I have done quite a lot of would be helping groups to perform using a kind of drum circle methodology, um,
Mm,
which is brilliant for groups who might have difficulties with attention and concentration and memory because it's in the moment. So as long as everybody's able to start and stop on time and do a call and response, you can craft a great little actual performance for people. So it's almost turned that on its head and made the performance the drum circle rather than the
wow,
drum circle the performance.
wow, yeah. We're kind of coming to our last question, sadly, Jane, because this is fascinating. And everyone's had a kind of unique answer to this one. But when you leave a workshop, when you've packed all your drums and your instruments away in the back of your van and shut the door, got into the van and turned the key and off you go, what do you hope you've left behind with the participants?
Um, a greater sense of connection with each other and with themselves, actually. Um, that something may have been there that, yeah, somebody discovered about themselves or about the people they've been spending time with. Um, Maybe a greater sense of confidence and um, having been valued in that situation.
And do you find, because you're working in particularly unique fields, or wellness and health and well-being kind of fields, that those kind of, that sense of connection, that sense of relationship, that sense of not being on your own, that sense of no longer feeling isolated, are really, really valued kind of skills to leave behind?
I think the recognition of that as a factor in health and well-being is certainly growing.
Yeah.
um, and very concretely in terms of social isolation and the recognition between absolute kind of physical health outcomes um, nowadays. I think it's still early days, but I do think that this is the future of where a lot of this stuff is headed. Um, we live in such a disconnected society, and this is a tool um, to begin to overcome some of we've kind of gone down a strange fork in the road in
Mm.
humanity. um, and Yeah, I think this is one tool, a tool that can help us start to knit ourselves back together again.
And it feels like it sits with, us to keep pushing this tool and keep, saying this tool is there, this tool is available. we've there's loads of science out there. There's loads of papers regarding the benefits of drumming, the benefits of choral work, the benefits of community musicianship, and how good they are for people. Have you kind of witnessed yourself, sort of personally, the development of people and seen how good this is?
Yes. um, I think I've been lucky to have been able to work with a group of people over the period of a decade, and to actually see how drumming can become a part of somebody's life and identity, and um, form concrete community with relationships that persist and offer good stuff to each other once the drumming is over. um so could drumming form community, or does community make better drumming? Yes. But I've really seen that work its way out practically, in terms of people who've been in a state of profound social isolation, who now have each other, in part because of drumming together once a week.
That feels like a really good place to stop. Thanks you so much, Jane. I could have spoken to you for hours.